Marcus Rashford, Casemiro, two of Manchester United's most recognisable faces. They're actually both conspicuous by their absence. Rashford, obviously, local academy prospect, one of the highest players in the squad, hasn't even featured in the squad for the last 3 games. Meanwhile, Casemiro, brought into great fanfare, had a fantastic season in his first season. Let's not talk about it in his second season. It's actually been pretty good this season. Has only played 2 matches under Ruben Amorim and hasn't featured since the Europa League game against Pilsen. Oddly enough, in both the games that he featured, Everton and Pilsen, he played quite well, actually. Drawed a lot of praise for both a commanding presence and a bit of leadership on the pitch, yet he remains sidelined. So what's happening at Manchester United? And is there another reason for both of these players to be marginalised? Now, I think with Rashford, you're looking at a bit of a convenience of timing. He's been absent from the squad. He's not been playing well. It's quite easy to take someone out of the squad if they're not playing well. And I think Casemiro one's probably gone under the radar a little bit because of the profile of Marcus Rashford being axed from the squad. But I wonder, is there something more at play? Is this more of a tactic from INEOS because of the harsh realities of the financial austerity that we're about to face under INEOS? Now let's roll it back a little bit. We're basically a year into the INEOS era at Manchester United. It was this time last year that Sir Jim acquired the stake in the club, and fans were optimistic. Lifelong Manchester United supporter, has promised to restore the club to former glory. But behind the scenes, the realities of what became a bloated, underperforming organisation that's financially strained because of the debt that the Glazers leveraged on the club have started to emerge. The Glazers left a bloated wage bill for on the pitch, spiral operational costs, and just a dysfunctional kind of club from on the pitch to off the pitch. People just were not doing their jobs. You know, you had CEOs incredibly well paid, but delivering next to nothing. You know, focus on sponsorships rather than performance in different areas. And you know, you can't even think about challenging for silverware when you've just got the priorities of the club all back to front. As a result, they've done extensive investigations into the operations of every aspect of the club, and as a result, sweeping cost-cutting measures have been implemented almost immediately, and a lot of them haven't gone down well. Initial signs were subtle. There was a season ticket price rise of 8%, pretty normal. Pre-season tour was scaled back a little bit to focus on the football a little bit, okay? Instead of embarking on like very lucrative sort of global tours, they opted for fewer matches. Okay, that's not bad. But the financial tightening hasn't stopped there, nor has it actually stayed just focused on performance and football. There's a rumoured end-of-season tour to Malaysia, which is only a few days before there's an international friendly. That doesn't sit well. I mean, I don't like them international friendlies at the end of a season anyway. They're ridiculous. But an end-of-season tour, I think Spurs and Chelsea did one of these at the end of last season. Doesn't sit well with me, that. It doesn't sit well with me, that. And then there's been, 250 redundancies across various departments. You've seen perks such as company cars, Christmas bonuses, and even staff parties have been cancelled. One of the most controversial, Sir Alex Ferguson's ambassadorial role, worth supposedly £2 million annually, was terminated. It's clear that the INEOS regime is willing to sacrifice everything that they can do to cut costs. They are looking to save money wherever they can. And that's not even getting me started on the ridiculousness of the £66 ticket price rise that they've put in. A lot of people are worried that that might end up being the new season ticket price, which is going to see a lot of season ticket holders not renew if that's the case. And it wasn't just behind the scenes who felt the squeeze. Wage bill must have been on the chopping block. It's the biggest cost to any football club. And at the time of the takeover, United's wage bill was one of the highest in the Premier League. Several players on or upwards of £300,000 per week for a club that, you know, is not competing for titles and is not consistently competing in the Champions League. It's just ridiculous and unsustainable. INEOS have introduced a more performance-based wage structure for the new signings, and they began to offload some of those higher earners. You've seen Sancho moved on. The next couple of highest earners just so happens to be Rashford and Casemiro. Supposedly 350 grand and 325 grand is what those two are on. And the rhetoric from the club has emphasised rotation, discipline, tactical decisions, selection preference. But I think the numbers tell a slightly different story. The fact that they're the highest earners in the squad. Let's reference Stephen Warnock actually making a point for the first time ever. In the fact, he's on TV every single day, but he actually made a point this week where he starts talking about he's been at clubs where they've been phased out. He's been at clubs where things just don't make sense, but they want to get your salary off the wage bill. And I don't think Rashford and Casemiro's status within the squad is reflected in their salaries. I don't think their salaries fit the new financial model that INEOS are trying to implement. Let's look at Casemiro, right? So he's bought from Real Madrid for 60 million. It was clearly a panic signing by Woodward because things went tits up in that first couple of games for Erik ten Hag. But he was a proven winner, and he was an anchor in the team that brought balance and had a fantastic first season. I mean, he was so good in that first season. People forget. They forget because he was probably so bad in his second season. He was a liability. There was times at the end of the season where he was playing like your mate who's just been let out of prison at Power League. He was horrendous. But this season, he's had a couple of real good, real calm, real assuring performances. And both of those last two appearances that we've seen, arrested Casemiro. He looks like a bit of a force, to be honest. His passing was crisp. His positioning was impeccable. The leadership on the field was there for all to see. But he's not even come off the bench in any game since. And this is when we've rotated against Spurs last week. Call it squad management if you want. But when we're moving players around into midfield and stuff like that to get a team out, and you're not bringing Casemiro off the bench, even when there's times that he makes the most sense to bring on, I think his salary's making him, and his age probably, a prime candidate for an exit. Maybe because you think you can get a fee for him, but definitely because you can get his wages off the books. And I think United are going to try and cash in on him as soon as that window opens. And then there's Rashford. Okay, he's been inconsistent, right? Let's have that straight out the bat. And he's been poor. I think he actually had an uptick in performance this season without actually getting the metrics to go along with it. I still maintain that I think he's been better than Garnacho has been this season, despite not having the goals and the assists that Garnacho has got. He's got those goals and assists despite poor performance. But he don't look right. And he certainly doesn't justify his position, status, or salary within the squad. And I think I've said now for several months, I would look to move Rashford on. I would do. Because I don't think you're getting value for money out of him, and I don't have the confidence that he's ever going to turn it around. Now, I actually believe he's got a better reputation abroad than he has within the Manchester United fan base. I actually think he's got a better reputation within the Premier League than he has at Manchester United. For some reason, there's just been this almost immediate latching on of Arsenal to Rashford. They think they can get him, and maybe they can. Maybe they're right. I don't know. I don't have any inside track on what's going on there. But they're falling after him because they think they can get him out of Old Trafford. And I think a change of scenery, and you probably do get a new, renewed Rashford. And Ian Wright made a great point. He only got to Arsenal at 28. Rashford at 27 can't be finished. But the difference is a hungry Ian Wright is not the same as the player that we're seeing in Marcus Rashford right now. So you can't really compare like for like. The fact that he's been out of the side and completely out of the squad. Now, there are rumours of what's happened and the reason that he wasn't in the team for the game that he was dropped for, the first game he was dropped for. But obviously that's not necessarily been substantiated, and the club have certainly not commented on that being the case. But to find him out of the squad entirely can only point to some sort of a disciplinary thing, especially when they're not saying he's got an illness. They're not even pretending he's illness or injured. So I feel like he probably doesn't fit the plans, and the club have spotted an opportunity, and maybe with him being contracted, he's gone, well, I'll just see my contract out, which is what players tend to do. But the fact that he's been completely ostracised from the squad, maybe the intention is to piss him off to the point where he goes, right, I'll fucking go then, fine. And then they can work on finding a suitor for him. But if you can get Rashford and Casemiro off the books, you're looking at like 25, 30 million or something off the wage bill a year. It's a hell of a lot of cash. It's a hell of a lot of cash. And that goes straight into the PSR, FFP sort of ledger. You might also get a pretty decent fee, which allows you to reinvest into some signings straight off the bat. And I think for a club that's under the financial constraints that we're going to be under, I think it's win-win. Even if Marcus got back to his best, I'm not entirely sure he's a natural fit for this system. So when you can look at the Rashford and Casemiro benchings or exclusions from the squad in isolation, and you can say it's just a decision and it might be the right decision, right? But I think when you put it together with the bigger picture of the financial austerity and the footballing ambition that they're trying to address, I think what they're doing is deliberate. I think the financial management of the Glazers left United in complete dire straits, and I think it's required drastic measures to stabilise the ship. Fans are seeing their ass with the ticket price rise, and they should, and I absolutely support that. And some of the other measures that the regime are doing. On one hand, I kind of understand where they're coming from a club point of view. On the other hand, you're thinking it feels like penny pinching when you've got the wastage that you've got in terms of player salaries and transfer fees. It feels like penny pinching, looking after the pennies but not looking after the pounds is what it looks after. Or that's what it feels like, I think. You know, you can't burn the bridges with the fans. You can't marginalise the fans. You could argue you can't marginalise some of your supposedly star players, but I actually think you can probably get away with that a little bit more because of the asset that they become. So what happens now? Well, I think the club try and sell them. I think the club try and sell them, and they might be able to get a fee. I don't know where Rashford goes. I think it'd be a big mistake to sell him to Arsenal. I really do. I think he'd probably go and thrive. I think the change in the environment would be enough to get him back on track, which is why I just don't see him getting back on track if he stays. So it's almost catch-22. You're like, you get Adolf if he goes, because he goes and he does well, but if he doesn't go, he doesn't actually get to that level. So it probably makes sense to sell him. United might be able to turn this around, but it is going to require some pinch points, like selling people that maybe as fans you don't want to see them sell, or marginalising players that you don't want to see them marginalise, getting rid of your highest earners, giving some youngsters some opportunities to step up and deliver. I just feel like the way that they're going about it possibly could be communicated a little bit better, and it also makes me worry. Okay, you need to charge 8-year-old kids 66 quid to come to a match. Right, makes sense. Yeah, fine, sort of. How are you going to pay for a £2 billion stadium? How are we going to sign anyone in the summer? There's so many questions for how this is all going to pan out. INEOS might have brought some very much needed financial discipline. And maybe this sort of like pain that we're feeling at the moment is required sacrifice because of we've just been fucking throwing it around like a lottery winner in a titty bar for the last however many years. But is there more to the ostracisation of Rashford? And is there something in the ostracisation of Casemiro? Because that's totally going under the radar because of Rashford being a much bigger name for Manchester United, I think. Is that the real reason they're not playing? Is their time at Old Trafford coming to an end? Or am I seeing conspiracies because I hang around with Ash and Ronaldo too much? Let me know in the comments. I'll see you in the next one. Laters. Hey, thank you for watching the video. If you are new around these parts, then don't forget to subscribe. My channel is proudly supported by my community on Patreon. If you'd like to get a little bit of extra content, a Discord group, meetups, five-a-side games, weekly podcasts, behind the scenes, and even an occasional bit of transfer news as and when I get it, then for the price of a pint, you can show your appreciation for the content that we make and get some goodies for doing so as well. Check the link in the description or click the button right here. You'll also find all of my socials here too if you want to follow me on any of those platforms. Nice one.